The unwavering adversary, a new era of thermal pursuit. Throughout human history, the struggle for survival has pitted humanity against adversaries armed with fangs, claws, or firearms. Yet, the most formidable hunter of our modern age possesses none of these. It operates in silence, without fatigue, discerning heat as clearly as stark print on a page. Imagine a lone survivor navigating a frozen pine forest as night descends, their boots softly crunching on the snowpack formed during a cold snap in January 2024. Above, a faint hum vibrates through the canopy. This is no bird, but a thermal drone, outfitted with a cutting-edge LWA sensor capable of detecting temperature variances as minute as 0.05 degrees Celsius. This sophisticated technology, identical to that found in the Flyer Bosun Plus systems deployed extensively by search and rescue teams and military units, has fundamentally altered the paradigm of concealment. While one can camouflage clothing, conceal shelter beneath branches, or disappear into cavernous shadows, any body heat diverging even slightly from the environment's temperature renders one visible to this machine. It observes everything. From approximately 2018 to 2024, thermal drones have seen a dramatic increase in precision. Their flight durations have doubled, their algorithms have advanced, and their detection ranges have expanded. NATO training reports indicate that contemporary unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, can pinpoint a human thermal signature from 300 to 500 meters, even through sparse foliage or thin shelter walls. This means that concealment is no longer merely a physical act, but a scientific endeavor. This is the genesis of the ghost shelter concept, not a reinforced bunker or a hidden retreat, but a thermal illusion. It is an engineered sanctuary crafted to evade detection, not by human sight, but by advanced sensors, processing units, and pattern recognition algorithms. Such a shelter imparts a singular truth. Technology is not outrun by speed, but bypassed by intelligent disappearance. By comprehending the behavior of heat, its absorption by the environment, and its interpretation by machines, one gains a tactical advantage rarely considered by contemporary survivalists. This manuscript marks the commencement of that exploration. Breathe deeply and enter a realm where survival demands mastering the art of deceiving the planet's most sophisticated observational tools. The science behind thermal vision. Why humans continuously radiate heat. Thermal cameras disregard color, form, or camouflage, focusing solely on contrast, the difference between an individual's temperature and that of their surroundings. This is precisely why a human body almost invariably registers as the brightest object in a thermal image. An average person emits approximately 80 to 100 watts of heat, according to NASA metabolic data. This is the thermal output of a small light bulb, perpetually radiating, even during stillness. Skin temperature typically hovers around 33 to 34 degrees Celsius. Breath around 32 degrees Celsius. And even footprints can retain warmth longer than the ground for up to 40 to 90 seconds, depending on moisture and soil composition. Thermal sensors ruthlessly exploit these discrepancies. Modern systems operate across multiple infrared bands, particularly in the LWIR 8 to 14 micrometers range, optimized for detecting warm entities against cooler backdrops. Cameras utilized by fire departments, border patrol, and increasingly by civilian drones translate emitted infrared radiation into pixel-by-pixel temperature maps. The clarity of the result, is unsettling. A person hidden behind a thin tent? Visible. Someone hunkered beneath a pine tree? Visible. A figure in a darkened basement? Still visible. This occurs because infrared radiation permeates gaps, openings, and thin fabrics. Even concrete, if cracked or inadequately insulated, releases sufficient heat for sensors to register anomalies. Battlefield and survival lessons from the past decade corroborate this reality. During the conflict in Ukraine, thermal drones frequently identified soldiers concealed in derelict barns, simply from the faint warmth seeping through cracks in the walls. In U.S. wilderness search operations, missing hikers have been located within minutes because drones detected their body heat long before rescuers reached their proximity. All evidence indicates that a person is not merely observed by thermal sensors. They are announced, like a beacon, in the night. However, there is a deeper implication. Just as machines detect warmth, the environment absorbs, reflects, and redistributes it. Rocks heat and cool at varying rates. Trees trap warm air pockets. Valleys collect cold air like invisible currents. To truly vanish, one must cease resisting the natural movement of heat, and instead learn to harness, redirect, and merge with it. This sets the stage for the most vital step of all. Terrain is half the battle, the ancient wisdom of hunters and guerrilla fighters. Long before the advent of drones, hunters, trackers, and guerrilla combatants understood that survival hinges not on equipment, but on the landscape itself. The terrain has always dictated visibility, movement, and concealment, and today it governs thermal invisibility too. In 2021, NOAA published atmospheric data revealing the existence of cold pockets, microzones where dense air descends, reducing ground temperature by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius compared to surrounding areas. These pockets manifest in depressions, ravines, and shaded valleys, particularly during early morning and late evening. They serve as natural thermal shields. Constructing a shelter within one allows your heat signature to blend with the ambient cold air, rather than ascending into open space. Dense coniferous forests offer another strategic advantage. Their multi-layered canopies trap air, impede heat exchange, and create thermal turbulence. Temperatures beneath a spruce canopy can be 2 to 6 degrees Celsius, lower than in adjacent clearings, especially in winter. This turbulence disrupts the distinct thermal outlines that drones rely upon. Mountain slopes and rocky outcrops also play a subtle role. Dark volcanic rock, such as basalt or obsidian, absorbs substantial solar heat during the day and disperses it gradually throughout the night, generating thermal noise zones. These zones confuse contrast-based algorithms because the rocks mimic human-like emission patterns. Guerrilla fighters in Afghanistan instinctively utilize this, often positioning themselves near cliffs that radiated sufficient heat to obscure their signatures from NATO surveillance cameras. Water, too, proves a formidable ally. Shelters situated along riverbanks, wetlands, or saturated soil benefit from natural cooling. Water absorbs heat far more efficiently than air. A body positioned near a flowing stream experiences rapid heat dispersion, diminishing contrast, and significantly complicating detection. And then there are the enduring lessons from World War II resistance fighters who hid within underground farm cellars, and the Sami reindeer herders of Scandinavia who sought refuge in frost hollows during blizzards. The most effective forms of concealment have always stemmed from interpreting the land and allowing nature to undertake the primary effort. By selecting your terrain judiciously, you resolve half the problem before construction even commences. A ghost shelter does not compel the environment to cooperate. It harmonizes with what naturally exists. For in the realm of thermal detection, the ground itself can become your most potent shield or your most significant vulnerability. The three-layer defense: insulation, reflection, and thermal mimicry. If strategic terrain selection constitutes the initial phase of vanishing, then the constructed shelter represents the second, beginning with a principle predating electricity. Prevent heat from escaping, decelerate its dissipation, and mask any residual thermal output. In survival engineering, this translates into what I term the three-layer defense. The first layer is insulation, not the conventional kind found in modern dwellings, but superior natural alternatives. Compressed moss, bundled straw, packed leaves, and even clay-dusted soil form dense, irregular thermal barriers. Archaeological studies of Viking turf houses in Iceland revealed that layered turf could reduce heat leakage by nearly 60%, a remarkably effective method that allowed these homes to retain warmth during harsh winters, while concealing heat signatures from afar. This logic is borrowed directly, containing body heat, slowing its escape, and forcing it to traverse unpredictable organic materials. The second layer involves reflection, drawing inspiration from aerospace technology. NASA's tests on mylar blankets demonstrate their capacity to reflect up to 97% of radiant heat when positioned correctly. The emphasis here is correctly. If the reflective layer faces inward, it bounces your heat back, whereas facing outward, it can strategically reflect warmth into the environment. However, if it is too smooth, too pristine, or too flat, drones will detect the cold void it creates. Therefore, mylar must always be backed by irregular natural textures, pressed leaves, clumps of soil, bark shingles, so that sensors interpret it not as a man-made object, but as an integral part of the forest floor. The third and most crucial layer is thermal mimicry, an aspect frequently overlooked. Disappearing is not merely about reducing heat. It is about merging the remaining heat into the environment's thermal rhythm. Consider stones. Many rocks absorb solar heat during the day and release it slowly throughout the night. Moss-covered surfaces retain moisture, generating cooling effects that persist for hours. Fallen logs in boreal forests trap pockets of warm air. By cladding the exterior of your shelter with a composite of these natural elements, wet soil, aged bark, stone fragments, you convincingly imitate their heat signatures. A drone's contrast-based algorithm will then perceive your shelter as merely another feature within the landscape. By integrating these three layers, insulation, reflection, and mimicry, one creates what survival scientists call a thermal buffer zone. This is a region where heat moves so slowly, so organically, and so unpredictably that it no longer forms a discernible human heat pattern. Instead, to the machine, it registers as noise. To the forest, it becomes just another shadow. And to you, it becomes life. The invisible vent, the essential lifeline for every ghost shelter. A common misstep for many individuals preparing for survival is the belief that complete heat containment is achievable. Yet, regardless of how meticulously insulation is applied, the human body constantly radiates warmth and moisture. Without a regulated ventilation system, this warmth eventually escapes in concentrated bursts, forming thermal plumes easily detectable from above. These towering columns of heat shine like signals. To counteract this, an undetectable vent system is essential. This system isn't designed to eliminate warm air, but to dissipate it so gradually and silently that the surrounding environment absorbs it entirely. This concept isn't novel. Engineers studying traditional Russian masonry stoves observed that their intricate channels guided warm air through narrow passages before releasing it slowly, reducing visible plumes by 70% to 80%. This principle can be adapted for survival by constructing a shallow trench system, no deeper than a forearm and just wide enough to accommodate an airflow path. Cover it with damp soil, decaying debris, or layers of branches. As warm air traverses this moist, uneven material, its temperature progressively decreases. By the time it reaches the surface, the difference between the vented air and the external environment might be less than 1 degree Celsius. This makes it almost impossible for drones to detect. Even more effective is combining this with a dual vent strategy. Position a small intake vent low to the ground on the cooler side of the shelter, ideally facing shade or a cold pocket. Then situate the outtake vent along the trench system, directing warm air beneath layers of moisture-rich material such as damp leaves or riverbank soil. Moisture absorbs and redistributes heat far more efficiently than air, creating what scientists term a thermal bleed, a slow and diffuse release, rather than a vertical plume. Real-world testing supports this. In 2019, the Canadian Survival School conducted thermal concealment trials in boreal forests. Shelters equipped with underground diffusion vents reduce thermal detectability by nearly 90% when scanned from 60 to 80 meters above the canopy. Without the vent system, the same shelters were instantly detected. This confirms one crucial fact. Your invisible vent is not optional. It is the cornerstone of your ghost shelter. It transforms peril into dispersion, urgency into imperceptibility, and your presence into nothing more than a faint whisper of warm air dissolving into the earth. 6. The art of low and slow heat, mastering your invisible footprint. Even with impeccable insulation and flawless ventilation, your actions inside the shelter can reveal your presence. The human body is a radiating engine, incessantly generating heat, and every movement either intensifies or diffuses that thermal signature. To survive, you must adopt the low and slow principle, a discipline unconsciously practiced by the world's most seasoned hunters, trackers, and soldiers. The principle is straightforward. Generate less heat, release it more gradually, and avoid sudden spikes that drones are trained to detect. For example, boiling water at 100 degrees Celsius produces a plume that rises rapidly, exceeding ambient air temperature by 10 to 40 degrees Celsius. Even small cooking fires create thermal anomalies visible from hundreds of meters. This is why elite survival instructors recommend utilizing thermal sinks, stones or large water containers that absorb heat from your cooking gear, allowing it to dissipate slowly over time. History provides striking examples. During World War II, Allied pilots who crashed behind enemy lines often relied on catalytic heaters, compact devices that burned fuel flamelessly and released heat steadily through chemical reactions. Their thermal signatures were nearly undetectable by early infrared scanners. The same principle applies today. By transferring heat into dense materials like rocks, clay pots, or water-filled buckets, you allow warmth to disperse over hours rather than minutes. This is the essence of the low and slow method. Cook exclusively with heat sinks. Warm yourself using indirect radiant sources. Consume meals that require minimal heating, especially during the night when the environment is naturally warmer. And move deliberately. Rapid movement increases metabolic heat, significantly raising your thermal signature. When you control how much heat you release and how quickly you release it, you begin to sculpt the thermal landscape around you. You cease to be a flare. You cease to be a beacon. Instead, you become a subtle suggestion, one that blends into the gentle pulse of the forest, the stone, and the soil. This transformation is subtle, not dramatic, yet powerful enough to confound even the most sophisticated sensors scanning the world from above. 7. Thermal camouflage. When hiding means matching the Earth's heat. Thermal camouflage isn't about color, it's about rhythm. Every natural surface warms and cools at its own unique pace. Moss-covered bark sheds its heat differently than wet stones. Soil rich in organic matter cools more rapidly than sandy ground. Pine needles exhale warmth long after sunset. These delicate variations create a living tapestry of temperatures that drones must interpret continuously. To vanish within this mosaic, you must emulate this natural thermal behavior. Research from the Australian Defence Science and Technology Group in 2020 revealed that thermal camouflage blankets layered with irregular textures reduced apparent heat signatures by 6 to 12 degrees Celsius, entirely sufficient to deceive mid-range sensors. The key wasn't uniform insulation, but irregularity, mimicking the chaotic patterns found in nature. You can reproduce this effect with simple materials. Damp soil, decomposing bark, green moss, and stone chips, all applied in overlapping, uneven layers around your shelter, create microzones of cooling and heating that disrupt thermal contrast. A drone scanning from 120 meters above perceives not a warm structure, but a patch of earth undergoing its normal daily temperature fluctuations. However, you can take the deception further. By strategically placing naturally warm or cool objects around the perimeter, sun-baked rocks, logs that retain heat, or wet sacks of soil, you generate what survival engineers term a thermal noise field. Instead of a single clear hotspot, the drone detects dozens of competing signals. Algorithms struggle to identify which, if any, belong to a human. This technique has been employed by reconnaissance teams since the late Cold War, when soldiers concealed themselves in mixed-temperature debris fields to evade experimental IR scans. Thermal camouflage is most effective when predictable patterns vanish. Straight lines, smooth surfaces, and flat plains must be avoided. Nature is never perfect, and for the machine to believe you belong to the forest, you, too, must cease to be perfect. 8. Urban camouflage, disappearing in broken cities of steel and stone. The wilderness provides natural shields. But in urban ruins, the rules of concealment shift. Concrete retains heat for hours. Steel beams radiate warmth long after sunset. Vacant apartment blocks generate wind tunnels that twist and scatter thermal signatures. Paradoxically, these harsh environments can offer some of the best places to disappear if you comprehend their thermal respiration. Basements, crawl spaces, sewage tunnels, and abandoned utility shafts all provide dense material barriers that either absorb or diffuse heat. Concrete walls exceeding 20 centimeters in thickness drastically reduce infrared leakage, especially in high humidity. Following major wildfires in California, search teams reported difficulty detecting survivors in structurally intact basements because heat dissipated unevenly through rubble and moisture-saturated foundations. To construct a ghost shelter here, begin by utilizing existing infrastructure. Old duct systems and ventilation pipes become ideal channels for dispersing warm air, functioning like your underground vents in the forest, but already engineered for undetectable air movement. Obstruct direct openings, force warm air through debris-filled passages, and let the building itself conceal you. Next, leverage the thermal drift effect generated by open high-rise corridors and shattered windows. As wind traverses an empty tower, it creates unpredictable temperature patterns, sometimes fluctuating by 3 to 5 degrees Celsius within seconds. Standing or sheltering near these zones confuses thermal algorithms that rely on stable background readings. In war zones like Aleppo and Mariupol, civilians evaded drone sweeps by staying close to large concrete slabs or collapsed bridge sections. These structures absorbed heat during the day and cooled slowly through the night, almost entirely masking human warmth. Urban survival isn't about hiding within the building's physical structure. It's about hiding within the building's thermal inertia, its slow pulse of heat. Where the city breathes, you disappear. 9. Testing and tuning. The military approach to perfection. No ghost shelter is perfect on its initial construction. Even elite forces recognize this. That's why every professional concealment strategy incorporates a phase most civilians omit: thermal reconnaissance of your own shelter. Affordable handheld thermal cameras, some costing less than a mid-range phone, enable you to perceive precisely what a drone observes. However, the key isn't merely pointing the camera once and considering the task complete. A shelter's thermal signature fluctuates dramatically based on the time of day, atmospheric moisture, and ground temperature. For this reason, military survival instructors conduct thermal inspections at 4 specific intervals: just before sunrise, at midday, in the late afternoon, and after nightfall. These windows represent the most extreme variations in environmental heat, particularly in forests or rocky terrain. Before sunrise, the ground is at its coldest, rendering warm leaks conspicuously evident. At midday, sunlight saturates the landscape with thermal noise, revealing whether your camouflage can blend into chaos. Late afternoon reflects cooling transitions, one of the most challenging moments for concealment. Nightfall assesses whether your insulation and vents genuinely prevent your shelter from glowing like an ember. Document every detail, implement modifications, alter vent orientations, augment the quantity of debris, rearrange your concealment materials, and embed one layer further. This methodical, iterative process mirrors the strategies employed by NATO surveillance teams when constructing concealed forward operating bases during the Balkan conflict of the 1990s. They would frequently refine their camouflage configurations, sometimes 3, 4, or even 5 times within a single day, until their positions seamlessly integrated with the surroundings. True expertise arises not from mere conjecture, but from precise evaluation. This is the transformation of novices into spectral presences. 10. Conclusion. When remaining unseen transitions from mere concealment to complete disappearance amidst the era of thermal drones, the act of hiding is no longer about obscure corners or hushed movements. It hinges on comprehending the dynamics of heat transfer through the environment, how it ascends, how it dissipates, how it adheres to rock formations, and how it permeates the earth. A phantom shelter is more than just a physical structure. It represents an ongoing dialogue with the environment, a delicate truce struck with the fundamental laws of physics and the sensory mechanisms that uphold them. Through selecting terrain characterized by thermal depressions, agitated overhead foliage, and moisture-rich soil, by constructing with a three-tiered defensive system that impedes, redirects, and emulates thermal cycles, by mastering the imperceptible vent that reintroduces warm air back into the ground, by adhering to a meticulous, deliberate approach that prevents noticeable thermal spikes, and by developing thermal camouflage that mimics nature's scattered patterns, you evolve from a detectable heat signature into a natural variation, an innocuous echo of the topography. The automated systems cease to identify you. The unmanned aerial vehicle discontinues its pursuit. The world no longer flags you as an anomaly. You are no longer merely unseen. You have dissolved. This constitutes the essence of the phantom shelter, an amalgamation of scientific principles, historical insights, and basic survival instincts. It is a proficiency not designed to evade technology, but to circumvent its capabilities. For those who grasp these fundamentals, the woodland, the rock, the river's edge, and even the dilapidated urban landscape transcend their roles as mere refuge. They become a protective shell. Should this information prove beneficial, please disseminate it. Subscribe to History Prime for more profound inquiries into forgotten engineering, ancient survival wisdom, and the timeless rationality that continues to surpass contemporary technological advancements. For in this world, the ultimate advantage belongs not to the most powerful, but to those who possess the knowledge to fade from sight.